All right, guys, so let's continue on with the Spider-Man films and review Spider-Man Homecoming, which is the second reboot of Spider-Man after a really quick succession. And if you don't know the story behind this, most people in the world do, but because The Amazing Spider-Man 2 was I don't want to say failure completely. I love that movie despite its issues, but it didn't make $1 billion. Sony wanted to make $1 billion, and it had reviews that were mediocre or good or bad. It was like really all over the place with The Amazing Spider-Man 2, where people loved a lot of things about it, hated a lot of things about it, and there were some people right in the middle about it. So um, they immediately were like, yeah, just dump this other version of Spider-Man and get rid of him, and we're going to do another one. And this time he'll be in the MCU, so we'll make it even more um, even more commercial and make it what they wanted it to make with the Amazing Spider-Man and its supposed spin-offs that they were gonna release with it, like Venom and the Sinister Six. Even though Venom was reincorporated later, like brought out, but we don't know what universe that is in yet. Still, um, but Spider-Man was introduced into the MCU in Captain America: Civil War, which I did not rewatch, and I am not going to rewatch in Avengers: Infinity War or Avengers: Endgame as well because while I love those movies, they're not really Spider-Man movies. Spider-Man is in them, Peter Parker is in them, but I'll give a quick, brief synopsis whenever I talk about each one. So, for example, with Spider-Man: Homecoming, I have to mention Captain America: Civil War because it happened right before Spider-Man: Homecoming, and then whenever I mention Far From Home, I'll mention Infinity War and Endgame. But like I said, those aren't really Spider-Man movies, so I'm not going to have another review on those or a rewatch of those because I just don't have time. I really wanted to focus on the Spider-Man centric ones. Um, Even though, to be fair, I'm going to rewatch the first Venom after this because I haven't watched that in a couple years, and I have watched the Avengers movies pretty recently, so I am going to watch Venom again, and that's the only one that doesn't star Spider-Man that I'm going to review again, but that's because of obviously Spider-Man No Way Home. But let's get started on Spider-Man Homecoming. Like I said, it is established in Captain America: Civil War that Tony Stark needed another player in the team to fight against Captain America, and he recruits Peter Parker, who is now played by Tom Holland. And I loved in Captain America: Civil War that you get a really, really fantastic introduction to Spider-Man in this universe where he is a dumpster diver, a kid who is really low on luck, and then Tony Stark comes in and recruits him. And I love that Tony Stark immediately takes to him like he's his kid or like a mentor. And the same with Peter Parker, where Peter Parker immediately like becomes like, wow, he's so cool that I'm meeting Tony Stark, kind of thing. And they have a really human moment in Captain America: Civil War whenever they meet each other, where Tony Stark's like, Why would you want to do this?" And Peter says, "Because I have abilities that people don't understand, and I want to help people." And I thought that that was such a great introduction to Spider-Man, and I really loved the fact that this is the third version of Spider-Man, and like the theatrical movies, and how they introduced him in Civil War was a fantastic introduction. I loved it. Such a sweet, great moment with him, and he's great in that movie. He's really funny. He's fun. He's got some great quips during the airport battle sequence, but then after that, he's gone out of the movie, out of Civil War. But again, that's why I didn't rewatch Civil War because it's not really a Spider-Man movie. I'm trying not to, besides the first Venom, because I haven't watched that in like years. But yeah, so Civil War I had to mention. I had to bring up Captain America: Civil War, which is actually my favorite Marvel MCU movie, like out of all of them, and I love that movie. Best written, I think, overall. Um, but Spider-Man: Homecoming starts out with a great introduction to Adrian Toombs, the Vulture, who is played by Michael Keaton, who is fantastic in this movie, and I really, really love him. He is one of the absolute best villains in any Spider-Man film. I mean, I know the Green Goblin is up there. I know Doc Ock is up there. Um, and I like the Sandman and Electro, and the Dane DeHaan, Harry Osborne. But I feel like, and I don't like Topher Grace Venom, but I feel like Adrian Toombs as the Vulture is one of the best, along with the Green Goblin and Doc Ock. Oh, and Mysterio I like too, but I need to rewatch that one to really get a remember that one, because I haven't rewatched that one in a while. The next Spider-Man, Far From Home, but it gets a great introduction to Michael Keaton in this as Adrian Toombs, and he is fantastic. I love how this guy starts out. He's not really that much of a villain. He is a scavenger who does something that he knows he's going to get in trouble for. He starts taking stuff from the Avengers battle from 2012 and starts creating weapons and selling them. And then, under the jurisdiction of Tony Stark, all of this stuff is taken away from him, so he now hates Tony Stark. And then flash forward, and it says 8 years later, but 8 years later would mean this movie takes place in 2020, so that was weird. They should have said 6 years later. I don't understand that, but that's such a weird thing that they messed up on in this movie, is that they said Avengers in 2012 with Michael Keaton, and then skip 8 years to 2020, where Captain America Civil War takes place in 2016. So this takes place, I guess, in 2017. So it's weird how it says 2020. That's definitely not right or accurate. It's one mistake I was surprised that they didn't catch. But people have mentioned that before. But I really love the opening with Michael Keaton. That's great to show his great setup. I really, really enjoyed him in this movie a lot. Like I said, he's one of the best villains. And I love how he uses the armor from the Chitauri to create his Vulture suit. I think that is really cool, and I think that's a really clever way to integrate it into the MCU. As for a reasoning why this movie is in the MCU, as opposed to, like, I don't know, like it just works very well with the way they wrote this one, just establishing that. And then I love how it opens up after Adrian Toombs' introduction to Peter Parker doing home video on his phone of all the stuff that happened in Captain America Civil War. So he is, you see him with Happy Hogan, who's Jon Favreau's great in this as well, but Happy Hogan, who's not happy and is annoyed that he has to take care of a kid. And Peter Parker just records himself all excited about every single thing he encounters, that he's in Germany, that he meets Captain America, all these different heroes, and like it's hilarious and it's funny, and I like how it just felt so sweet. Like, this Peter Parker is a very sweet Peter Parker, and it's weird because I think Andrew Garfield is my favorite overall still in terms of performance, but this Peter Parker that Tom Holland plays is such an adorable one, because the way he portrays himself as this really, really happy character, and he just, no matter what he gets thrown at him, he still makes it through. And I like how he's just got this sweet personality that I think is different than the other two Spider-Mans, even though I love those other two. So it's great seeing that. Tom Holland does a really great job, and I'm so glad that they kept Tom Holland after they kind of ditched Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield. But I'm glad that Tom Holland is getting more movies, so it's fine by me. I like the setup that Peter Parker wants to be Avenger, but then there's no action going on, so he's just a normal kid, and he doesn't want to be a normal kid. He wants to go out and fight because he got a bit of the action in Germany. So that's really, really cool, and I like the fact that this one, it's weird because every time they reboot the Spider-Man movies, they've got to kind of wrap around, like, trying not to do the same thing again. In this one, they don't mention Uncle Ben. They have not mentioned Uncle Ben in any of the Spider-Man movies with Tom Holland. They did mention it in the Marvel's What If show, the animated show that is the character that is in these movies, but it is not mentioned in the actual Spider-Man films, like that Tom Holland is in. Uncle Ben is not mentioned. Aunt May is way younger and way more beautiful, and everybody makes the joke that she's a hot mom or a hot aunt in the movie all the time. But they also don't have Mary Jane or Gwen Stacy because, again, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man had Mary Jane and Gwen Stacy, and then The Amazing Spider-Man 2 had Gwen Stacy only. So this time we have Liz Allen, who I really liked. She had not appeared in Spider-Man Far From Home, so I wonder if she'll appear in No Way Home, but I feel like she'll appear eventually again. But I liked her, and I liked Michelle, who Zendaya plays, and Zendaya is an actress that I haven't seen. Like, she was in The Greatest Showman too, and I like her as an actress. She's a singer I think she's a singer, right? I don't even know. I know that she's just famous, but she's good in these movies, and I like how she's really funny and snarky, and she's just the tomboy character where she like says mean things, but it's funny because she's just trying to be angsty, and I think that works in this movie with her character. Um, and then, of course, since we got Harry Osborn in the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy, and then we got it in the Amazing Spider-Man 2, we did not have Harry Osborn in this movie. We have Ned, who is a character I don't know that it was in the comics, but um, like, he's fine, but like, I definitely like Peter's other versions of friends more in the other movies. Like, he's fine. Jacob Italian does a fine job, but like, I felt like they should probably just, maybe if they keep going, whenever they keep going with these movies, maybe Ned will be a little more interesting. But I felt like he wasn't as interesting because he didn't have, like Harry Osborn did in the other two Spider-Man versions, where they had a lot more to do with him. In this one, this Ned character is just kind of like the best friend who geeks over everything, and it's funny, but it's not as much of a character. I mean, he's fine. Like I said, he's fine as an actor, but it's like, I don't know. But I wonder what they'll do with him in No Way Home. We'll see. I like the use of music in this. I know that the Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2 did that as well, and they had great music in that. But I like the use of music in this with bands like the Ramones, which was really cool. Especially the ending credits with Blitzkrieg Bop playing. I think that was a great way to end the movie. Like, I thought that was hilarious. I love how Peter wants to be an Avenger so bad that he makes crime up and accidentally creates more crime. So, like, for example, he'll see a guy on a bike and he takes him off the bike and hooks him up in the air and says, "Is this anybody's bike?" And then it's just that guy's bike. Or there's a guy trying to get into his car and Peter webs him to the car and he's like, "That's my car, dumbass." Like, it's the guy who actually owns the car, but Peter uses that and thinks that he's trying to rob his car. And I think that is funny that this kid, 15-year-old Peter Parker, does not know how the world works. And even Michael Toombs said, or even the Vulture, Adrian Toombs, says this later in the movie. Like, you don't know how the world works. So I like that a lot. The main musical theme to this is really great. I hum it a lot now. Like, I really love the main musical theme for Spider-Man in this. And I really love in Sam Raimi's trilogy that Danny Elfman, his scores. And I like James Horner's music a lot in the first Amazing Spider-Man. And then I loved Hans Zimmer and Junkie XL's and Pharrell's music in The Amazing Spider-Man 2. But this one, while not completely memorable in the whole score, I think that the main theme of the Spider-Man in this is really fantastic. I thought the action in this was really, really great. The monument scene where Ned has the Chitauri piece and it blows everything up, where they're all falling down, and they're almost going to fall down the elevator. He gets everybody. And I noticed that they do this a lot. They even did this in Venom Let There Be Carnage, where the girlfriend character is hooked on a web or hooked on something, and then there's a point of view of her down where, like, she's going to fall, but she's held on. Just like Gwen Stacy in The Amazing Spider-Man 2. And in this one, Liz is in the same shot like it is with Gwen Stacy in the last movie, Amazing Spider-Man 2. So it's funny to see that visual similarity. And again, like I said, Venom Let There Be Carnage is the same thing too. They just love that shot, I guess, of like the girlfriend dangling down, almost dying or dying. But that's a really good scene. I really liked, this is a kind of a side note in terms of how I'm reviewing this, but Jennifer Connelly as Karen, the AI voice for Peter's suit, is awesome. And it's so funny that she's in this movie because she's married to Paul Bettany, the Vision. So I love that connection. And I thought it was genuinely funny with that Karen voice. Like, that was so hilarious. Like, she was so sweet and nice. And I love Jennifer Connelly already. And that's just a funny way to bring her into this movie. And I just didn't realize that when I first watched the movie that it was her, but it's her. And you even have Donald Glover in this as well as Miles Morales' uncle in the comics. So I'm guessing Miles Morales will be appearing sometime down the line in these Spider-Man movies. But Donald Glover, he just steals the show in everything he's in. I love the line where he says, or Peter as Spider-Man says, like, "You remember me, right?" And he says, yeah, I remember what a girl sounds like. Like, that's a good joke. And I really like how he gets trapped, Donald Glover's character, and Peter's like, okay, that web will wear off in a few hours, and then he's like, nah, let me out, and then Peter's like, no, you're a criminal, bye, Mr. Criminal, and he leaves. Like that back and forth between Tom Holland and Donald Glover were great. Like, I really thought that was so funny. He was a great little moment in the movie, and this movie does a fantastic job of having little side characters that are really funny or entertaining. I also like the guy who worked at the substation at the beginning. I forgot what his name is, or what his last name is, something Italian, but he was really, really funny as well. I really like the action scene where it's on the ferry, and then Peter webs it up like Tobey Maguire does, like in Spider-Man 2, but this time it's like a whole ship broken in half, so he's trying to keep it webbed together. And then of course Iron Man has to come and help him, Tony Stark. And that scene between Peter and Tony Stark, where Tony says, like, I'm getting the suit, you're not gonna have it anymore, and Peter says, I need the suit, that's all I have. And Tony says, if you can't do anything without the suit, you don't need the suit. And it's a really great father-son moment, even though they're not related, you know what I mean? But I like the fact that the utilization of Tony Stark in this is great as well, because it is not a Tony Stark movie. It is a Peter Parker movie, first and foremost, with Tony Stark occasionally appearing. Not in the way where it feels pandering. It feels actually really well done into the script, with just how he's established, how Peter vies for hanging out with him, but he's not in the movie that much. So I really enjoyed that, because you could so easily put Tony Stark as the second player in this movie. And okay, so I'm going to mention this. I mentioned Michael Keaton as Adrian Toombs, Vulture. Whenever I saw this in the theater, me and everybody in the audience gasped. Like, it was insane, where Peter's getting ready for homecoming dance with Liz. He goes to Liz's house, and then the door opens, and it's Adrian Toombs, and he is Liz's dad. And that was such a great twist that nobody saw coming, and it was such a quick, surprising twist. It wasn't like a big, reveal. It was just like, oh, he opened the door, and he's there, and you're like, oh, this changes everything. And again, it's so well written to the fact that this character is her dad, and that the fact that Peter now has to play games in the car with him, where Adrian Toombs pretty quickly figures out that Peter's Spider-Man. And I love that the set of dialogue between them in the car, where Liz does not realize, but they're both playing mind games with each other. It's so good. So I love that. That's what makes him a great villain as well. Just moments like that where you just really remember him. And the movie's called Spider-Man Homecoming, so there's a homecoming dance, but Peter does not go to the homecoming dance because he is Spider-Man and he has to save the day. So it's funny that it's called Homecoming. I do like that name still regardless, but I really like afterward where Adrian Toombs and Peter meet up underground, or underneath in that parking garage, and Adrian Toombs says to Peter, like, why do you want to be like Tony Stark and them? Why do you want to be a part of people who don't care about you? We're the people that clean up their messes. We're the people that fight their wars. We're the people that clean up after them. And I like that they have this conversation in this movie, because Spider-Man is a character, first and foremost, that I feel like really benefits from that, where he is a on-the-grounds hero. Like, he is the hero that saves the day in New York City for the lower people, for people who are not big superhero villains, or I mean, not superheroes. Like, he's the one who does the side stuff on the ground, like, say, Daredevil or Jessica Jones or Luke Cage. Like, all those people, he's like them, where he's more of a grounded superhero. He's not one that goes into space all the time, not one who uses magic. He is a normal kid, and I really like the fact that whenever Toombs says that, it just really gives a great distinction between this version of Spider-Man, because he really doesn't know what he wants, and he's enamored by Tony Stark. But then you realize that at the end of the movie, which is great, where he tells Tony Stark he's going to stay on the ground for now because of Adrian Toombs' conversation with him. I think that's great. I think that's great that the villain can change Peter to what he should be. And I like that Adrian Toombs is also right. Like, he does clean up the mess for all these people who are above him. And and it's weird because a lot of people can relate to that very, very well. That's why Spider-Man is so relatable. That's why he's my favorite superhero. But I really like as well after that, he was just distracting Peter to have the rubble fall down on Peter. And that moment where Peter is wearing the old suit, his suit is taken by Tony Stark, the new one. And I love whenever Peter's just stuck in the rubble crying, freaking out, like, I got to get out of this. Somebody help me. And then he looks into the water, sees his mask, sees half his face. And then you hear Tony Stark say, if you're not able to do anything without the suit, you shouldn't have the suit. And then that brings the triumph moment of the movie, which is so great, where Peter just lifts himself up out of the rubble without that suit that Tony gave him, without anything at all. And now he is stronger than ever because he learned his lesson, or learned that you can be a hero without being like Tony Stark. And I really, really love that. I think that's a great moment of him lifting himself up out of the rubble. And the fight at the end of the movie is great because it's more grounded than, like, it feels like the first Spider-Man, like the one with Tobey Maguire, where, like, they just kind of fight in an abandoned building, like Spider-Man and the Green Goblin in that movie. And in this, like, it feels like it's back to that kind of basics, because in Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2, they're fighting throughout a lot of different locations, and in this one it's a very quiet, quaint location where, like, they're just on this sand by an amusement park, and they're just fighting it out, Spider-Man and Vulture. And it's great. It's great that the Vulture still wants to get what he thinks he deserves, and Peter's trying to save him because Peter is a good person, still trying to save the bad guy. And I love that Peter has that mentality of still trying to save somebody no matter what. And you can even see in the trailer for Spider-Man No Way Home that he wants to save these villains that have died by the hands of Spider-Man, the other villains from the other universes. So, and Doctor Strange says no. So I'm wondering if that'll be another connection to this, where, like, Peter is so selfless, even if it's a villain, he will try to save them. I think that's great. So I love that. I love that, like I said at the end, I love that he declines being an Avenger because he needs to be on the ground. That's what his purpose is, or that's what he feels like it should be. So I really appreciate that. The last scene, I think, is fantastic and hilarious at the same time, and they do a great blending of both, where Peter goes home and then realizes that Tony Stark gave him the suit back, and he puts on the suit. The triumphant music plays, camera turns around, and then Aunt May's just in the background, and she just says, "What the?" And then it just cuts, like, you know what she says, and it just cuts to credits, and that is hilarious. And genuinely, one of the endings I didn't expect in any Spider-Man movie. And no Spider-Man movies ended with Aunt May cussing. Like, that's hilarious, and that's great. But also, it's a younger Aunt May. It's a Marissa Tomei Aunt May, so... But I really, really like that ending. That's great. And... Of course, the end credits, you get the establishment of Vulture keeping his word. Michael Toombs keeping his word that he will protect Peter now because Peter saved him, where the Scorpion, or this guy, I forgot what his name is, that's the Scorpion, like, he meets him in prison and he says, "Do you know where the Spider Friend is?" And then Adrian Toombs says, "If I knew where he was, he would already be dead." So I thought that was a great way of keeping his promise, and Peter keeping his promise. Like, they both saved each other, so they both have a debt to each other. So that'll work out in wherever the Vulture appears again. I know he appears in Morbius, the next movie with the next Spider-Man villain, but I'm assuming he's going to appear in No Way Home in some way, shape, or form. Hopefully, but that movie's going to be so crammed, I really don't know. Like, I don't know what their plan is for the whole, because they just announced 3 more Spider-Man movies with Tom Holland, so we'll see. But that, I know nothing about the Scorpion. We haven't seen him in any form of film yet, so seeing that one guy randomly was like, okay, but we still haven't got that, because Spider-Man Far From Home did not have the Scorpion, or Liz Allen. Like, that movie kind of went on its own route from Spider-Man Homecoming. So, but I really rewatching this one again, I think this might be one of my absolute favorites. I'm really debating on if I'm going to put it above, like, like the one I love the most is Amazing Spider-Man 2, and I know that's a messy movie and it's not the best movie. It definitely isn't, but I love that one alone based on acting, score, action sequences, but it's a messy movie. And this one might be one of the best and one of my favorites, and I'm gonna put it really high on my re-ranking. So really love Spider-Man Homecoming on rewatch. Can't wait to watch the other ones. Like I said, after I watch this, since I just watched this one, I'm gonna rewatch the first Venom because, like I said, it's not a Spider-Man movie, but I haven't watched that in a couple of years, and of course, No Way Home is going to bring Venom in it some way, shape, or form. And then I'm going to rewatch Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, which might have connections to Spider-Man No Way Home because it's multiverses. And then the last one I'll watch is Spider-Man Far From Home before No Way Home, which is the second Tom Holland movie, which I'm excited to see because I don't remember loving that one, honestly. So I'm really interested to rewatch that one and see what I think about it. But as of now, I really do love Spider-Man Homecoming. It's got to be one of my favorites rewatching it. So that's it for today. More reviews coming up. Tell me down below what you guys thought of Spider-Man Homecoming, and I'll see you guys later.